I
And
know.
we're live.
It always sounds like we're about to launch a rocket ship, doesn't
It
it?
does, right?
Like, 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, we're live.
Yeah, exactly.
Woohoo!
We need some kind of animation for everybody,
Yeah, yeah,
so that
yeah.
they could experience what we experience. We've talked about it a number of times. Well, hello, Rosemary. How are you?
Hi, darling. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're back with Everything Is Attitude, our weekly show. We've been doing this for a while now, and we're like veterans at this now, huh? We've been doing this
Well,
for quite some
actually,
time.
it's we thought that people would really love it, and I think people do. But truthfully, I think we get more out of it than anybody else does. Don't you think? We just indulge. This is an indulgence for us, right, Al?
Yes, yes. Well,
We often
we did shift the time because of my schedule, and
yes,
I
we
think
did.
people are starting to get maybe more used to the new time, right?
Yeah. Well, it's your schedule, so and
Yeah.
and I'm just going with the flow
Yes. Thankfully, you were able to go with the flow on
as
this one.
I try my best to do
Yes,
in
yes,
all things.
yes. And as you've encouraged me over the years, and I'm getting better at.
Yes, right.
um,
Thanks.
so today, welcome to everyone. Everything is attitude, first of all. And today, I'll let you just discuss the topic, but it's a topic that I think is probably prevalent in most people's lives. Right? It comes up multiple times a day, I would say. And how people deal with this specific topic that I'll let you reveal affects attitude one way or the other in a major way. Probably one of the bigger things that affects attitude.
Yeah.
So I'll let you explain what that topic is. This great topic that you thought up yesterday, based on some input from the show. Yes.
No, actually, I was talking about it with Michelle because uh, let me see what started it off. I think I was talking to Michelle about my students, and I had my friend Kay here from England, and Kay, I've known Kay for 37 years. She's been a student for at least 35 of those years, still is a student now, even though she's fully qualified as a healer herself, and she did a 3-year training course with me, has earned a certificate, but still, we all consider, all of the people I've ever taught, all consider that I'm still the teacher, no matter how qualified they get. Um, and over the years, of course, we've had students come and go. We've had students who have embraced the teaching, and we've had students who have, sort of kicked against it a little bit. And of course, amongst all of that amount of students, because there's been a lot of people, we've had those students who have complained from time to time. It's not fair. She's nicer to him than she is to me. Or, well, it's not fair because why am I being held back a lesson when everybody else goes forward? It's not fair. And Kay and I were discussing this "it's not fair" thing and how it affects all of us in some way or another. And I'm not quite sure why we have this almost we're indignant when life isn't fair, but honestly, when did life ever be fair 100% for anybody? Because I don't know anyone who has experienced a life of absolute fairness. And it sort of reminded me, as I was talking to Kay, it reminded me of when my daughter, even at 2 years old and 3 years old, she would come to me if something happened, if she had a birthday party and some kid had more cake than she did, or if she perceived that one of her friends could stay up a little bit later than the other. And even now with my grandson, now he said to me the other day, it's not fair. It's not fair. I was eating ice cream. I was sort of on camera with him, and he was telling me what he'd had for dinner, and I said, "Well, guess what? Mosey's eating. I'm eating ice cream." Oh, it's not fair. And we hear that cry often, and we
Well,
don't always.
Rosemary, fairness overall, if you look at fairness, right, it's very subjective in
Very
nature, right?
subjective. Yes.
And fairness for one is not what is, even if it's the same individuals involved, fairness for one might not mean the same thing for even the other person
Right.
involved. So
Well,
it's a very slippery slope when you start, because there's judgment in there, right? There's a lot of things that go
you are
into
judging.
the fairness, right?
Mainly, you are judging. It's so, the disparity is you get one student who is held back. Uh, Only because I decide that that student needs a little bit more time with the lesson that they're having trouble with, and then you get another student who is, is saying yes, but uh, if I were to move that person forward, but I've been here longer than she has, or I've done more work than she. How come she's ahead of me? And so it is a very subjective thing. But I always used to say to my child from the age of 2, which may sound, and she was talking very well at the age of 2. Let me tell you, she was talking when she was a year old, and she could reason and she could figure things out. And she would come to me and say, "But, mummy, it's not fair." And my answer would be the same as it is for my grandson still today. Did I ever tell you? Did I ever suggest to you that life was fair? Because I never told you that life was fair. And in fact, if we're discussing it, I can tell you that life is so often unfair, or seems, because it's a subjective thing, it seems to be unfair. But going back to the sort of the issue of the student, would it actually, is it more fair for me to hold the student back so the student can learn properly the lesson that they obviously haven't learned? Or would it be fair for me to throw her into the next lesson, not being capable of doing it because she hasn't learned the previous one? You see? So, so again, luckily I'm the teacher, so I decide, but the student might be really cribbing about it. So it's not, no, it's not fair.
But
And that's,
Rosemary, if you go back to, like, you started out with going with the flow, right? And fairness with that, with judgment. If you take a simple example like that, they got more cake than I did. You know, it's about judging who should get a bigger piece of cake or a small piece of cake, right? But it's also about going back to that flow piece, because people with fairness in general, I think people are judging, but also trying to fix it in their own mind, right? When you say something's unfair, it's like it doesn't make sense to you, and because it doesn't make sense to you or it's unjust, people will be like, "Hey, that's not
oh,
fair," and
oh
they get
wait, oh
frustrated,
wait, it
right?
feels unjust.
It feels right. It feels that's
But
exactly
you can't say that it is unjust. It's
right.
just it feels unjust in the moment.
Right. Right. So then they are reacting in a way that is in their mind is justified, but truly it we don't know what's truly fair. We don't know what's truly just. We don't know that we're reacting the right way because we don't know what is truly fair, what is truly the best outcome in a situation for all parties involved, right?
Well, I think that the key to dealing with unfairness, or I should say, one of the keys to dealing with unfairness, is whether or not you trust.
Right.
So, if you don't trust the person who's making the decision, a decision that you may consider unfair, if you don't trust that person, then that's when you might start to complain about things not being fair. If you trust, then you're more likely to say, I don't like it especially, but I guess she has or he has her reasons. For instance, if you're in an environment, you're in a working environment, and it seems somebody else got the promotion over you. If you trust your boss and if you trust your work colleagues, you can, even though the initial impulse is to say, but it's not fair because I've had more years than him or her, you can actually sit back and say, but maybe this person gets the situation better than I, so therefore will be better in that position than I, you can reason it. But if you don't trust, or if you allow your frustration, your anger, your bitterness against all this unfairness to get to you and to eat you up, then nobody wins really, and you certainly, you the person who's saying it's not fair, certainly you don't win. Forget it.
And
Not going to
and,
win.
yeah, and we're talking in my mind is it's two parts of fairness, right? One is the actual judgment piece. Is it fair? It's not fair, and that decision sort of that you're making in your mind to say it's fair or not fair. And I think there are other instances where, in fact, it may be unfair, or life is unfair kind of thing. But then, what do you do with it? Even if it is, does it really matter if it's fair or not fair? How you approach that and what your attitude is about that, whether it's fair or not. How do you approach that, and how do you look at things despite unfairness, either your
Well,
perception or truly unfairness?
okay. Well, one way, of course, to deal with things that you don't feel are fair is, this is one approach. I'm not suggesting that I advocate it, although there are times when I do advocate suck it up, buttercup, because because
That's written on the wall of my gym for my kids, but
is it?
yeah.
Because because sometimes you can waste so much time and energy in the complaining area. It's not going to change anything, makes no difference to anything. But sometimes you can waste so much energy, so much, you can surround yourself with so much negativity, um, that really, deal with it. If you don't like it, work harder. If you don't like it, reason it out with somebody. If you don't like it, go talk to the person you feel is being unfair, and say, "Can I talk to you? Can you explain the reasons why you did this or this?"
Right.
I advocate that to my daughter, and I certainly advocate it to my grandson. He's 6 years old, but I still encourage him. If you think it's unfair, why? Why do you think it's unfair? And we had a situation the other day where he was invited to go someplace, and he sort of really wanted to go, but he wasn't sure about whether to leave it. He wanted to leave his
This is
mum.
your grandson, yeah?
This is Reed. This is
All right.
Reed. Yeah,
Yeah.
6 years old, and so and I talked. He asked his mum if he could talk to me, because he always talks to me, and he will say, "What, I just want to know what Mosey thinks," right? Because I am in those moments the voice of reason. So I said to him, "Well, if you really want to go, then you should go. But what about Mummy?" He said, and I said, "But Mummy's going to sit home. She's going to make a really nice dinner, and she's going to probably watch a movie. Watch a movie. Watch a movie without me. Without me. She's going to watch a movie without me." And I said, "Yes, but if you are having a great time somewhere else, which you should, then you shouldn't feel that it's unfair if Mama doesn't have a great time. She'll miss you, of course, but she'll have a nice meal and a movie, and you can see her the next day." And he, in the end, he decided, because it wasn't fair that she got to. Now the silly thing is that had he gone to this other place, he knew he would be able to watch a movie. He would be happy to watch a movie, but the idea of his mummy watching a movie without him it simply, no, that wasn't right.
It
So
does. It didn't make sense, right, Rosemary? It didn't make sense to him. That's
it
what
didn't make
unfairness is,
it
right?
didn't make sense. But what he did was, which was great, the 6-year-old doing this, is I want to talk to Mosey. I want to see what Mosey says. In other words, I want Mosey's opinion on it. So I was able to sort of guide him. And this is what, if you feel, if anybody out there is listening and you feel that life has been unfair to you, you know, just stop and consider. We had a lady on on the Thursday show who was basically saying, not in a whiny or complaining way by any means, but she was really frustrated and she was really confused because she said, you know, everyone around me is successful and they're happy and their lives are great. And it doesn't matter what I try to do, my life is not. It's not fair. You know, I've worked
and judging and evaluating everybody
right,
else's life.
right, and I pointed out to her that just because people around you seem to be happy, they seem to be successful, they seem to be all of those things. I always say to people, nobody knows what happens when the door closes behind a person. You do not know what that person is doing. And I pointed out that, you know, when I used to work at the pub, I would be smiling and happy and all the rest of it. And I'd come home and sit on the stairs and cry because I was so miserable. But I always put on a really good face. So anybody looking at me, looking at me, and they were maybe having a miserable time as well, they wouldn't see me as being miserable. They would say, oh, it's all right for her. She's got everything. It's all right. And we do that. And what we're doing is we're judging other people and we're comparing ourselves to other people or other situations, which is when that little nasty little voice says, well, it's not fair. How come she or he has got everything and I don't have anything, you know? But we are judging without even being able to judge because we don't know the facts of somebody else's case. And as I said to this woman, you just need to stop looking at other people and judging whether other people are happy or miserable. Get on with your own life. Make your life positive. Forget everybody else, because honestly, somebody might look idyllically happy, but behind closed door they might be as miserable can be. So
And
again,
they may
as you
be dealing with things that we have no idea that they're dealing with.
right, exactly. But as you've said, it's a, you know, it's it's personal to you, isn't it? It's all relative to what you're feeling, how you're thinking at that moment, and of course judging a situation. But there are all the other thing that happens when we go down that road of it's not fair. Uh, it's so easy to get into a pity party.
And we talk about that spiral downward too,
Yeah,
Rosemary, with a lot of these
yeah.
things. Yeah.
It's so easy when it's not fair. It's not fair, and she's nicer to him. And why did he get the gold star and nobody else got one? And you know, and I want to say to the grown-ups who do this, I want to say to them, what are you, 8 years old? Because it seems to be such a childish thing. But again, that spiral down, and I think it often stems from people being insecure, having their own insecurities. You know, she likes him better than she likes me. Is all about, you know,
I had this ex boss who I couldn't stand, but and part of me
really?
and part of me, this is a different ex boss than the one you know.
All
um,
right, okay.
and but she said something one time that resonated with me, and it always comes up. And I may have brought it up on the show. She used to say, "Don't preach to the problem," and what she meant by that is the problem exists. Don't keep going back on it and circling. Find a solution, and fairness in the way is doing
I
it.
actually thought I was the one who told you that. But anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sure you have said it to me as well. But fairness is the same thing. Like if you're focusing on the injustice and what you think is fair or unfair, it's very much wasted energy because you're not going to change. And we've talked about before, and maybe one of the recipes for dealing with this is rather than preach to the unfairness or focus on the unfairness, which is not going to change anything. Do things like you suggested before. If someone gets promoted over you and you think it's unfair at work, then do a few things. Reflect and say, why did that? Maybe it's something I'm not doing at work, or not presenting myself, or not showcasing what I do. Think reflectively inward. What could I do differently? And also, like you said, do something in the positive space. Talk to your boss. say, hey, listen, I really was looking forward to getting promoted. Can you tell me what I can do to,
Exactly. What
to,
can I do? What
to,
can I do
to
to improve me?
right, so that I can be considered next time something comes around.
Right.
Not not focus on the why didn't I get this? Or, like, what can I do better so that when the next promotion comes around, I can be considered, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and I think people have a tendency also to focus on the the person that they perceive uh, is picking on them,
Right.
or
Or
not being
being
fair
unfair to them, yeah.
to them, and often you pick on the person. Maybe the person didn't have a choice. Maybe the
Right.
person is limited in their choices, or maybe the person is trying to do for you the best that they can do. But when you're in that mode of it's not fair, it's very easy to take that spiral down, but it's also very easy to point the finger at other people instead of looking at your own self to fix what's going on with you and to focus what is going on with you.
Yeah. So Rosemary, empathy too. Like, if you take the example of, one kid gets a bigger piece of cake and one kid gets a smaller piece of cake, right? A child gets upset, mine's small, but if that child had the capability to say, okay, what, maybe it was chance, but maybe the mom knew that the other kid that got the bigger piece of cake was going through something serious and just needed a little extra to make them feel a little bit better. And and with the job piece, maybe the boss didn't have a choice. Maybe they were doing this to save someone's job. Maybe they were doing this because they were told from the higher
we're,
up that this person.
we're now talking very seriously about giving the benefit of the doubt,
Right,
which
exactly.
is
Yep.
what we try to advocate.
Which
And
goes back to trust, like you were saying before,
yeah,
too. Yeah.
yeah, very much about trust. I've got a question for you here because I know what I feel, but I want to throw this out at you. Do you feel, because 2 or 3 times now you've mentioned the word justice, I think even once you said injustice. Are we talking about the same thing? Do you think? I know what I think, but are we talking about unfairness equals injustice, or are they two very different things?
I think
Fairness and does fairness equal justice? Does unfairness equal injustice?
no, because I think that's again the perception that's in the eye of the beholder, right? So what's truly fair, what's truly unjust, I think they're different. I do think they're different.
Well, I do too. I think
Yeah.
that it is like there's this big gap. I think that when people start to consider themselves or life as being unfair, um, and this is not a criticism. I say this in understanding because I've been in a place where I've had many pity parties. Put
Right.
my hand up and say,
Mine's up too. So
right, exactly. I think we can all do that, right? We have those times when we just feel so sorry for ourselves and the spiral, the negative starts to happen. I think unfairness or feeling unfair or feeling that life is unfair can really spiral down into a pity party, and it
Mhm.
might even be triggered by a pity party. So there's a danger of the self-pitying, which again I own. I've been there. You say you've been there. We've all been there. So when you start to sort of feel it's not fair, I think one of the ingredients that we have to put in the pot is the understanding that this feeling of it's not fair stems from feeling, self pitying. And going back to kids, I mean, yeah, the bigger piece of cake, that you had 2 ice creams today, and I had one. That's one thing because we expect that with kids, and I would like to see every parent say to their child, "When did I ever tell you that life was fair?" I think it's very important. I do think it's really important. I know we laugh about it, but it is important to teach your children that really life isn't fair. You can work really, really hard at playing the piano. You can work really, really hard at being the best on the football field. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. And the kid who's going to be, you know, a natural on the football field or the natural at the piano is always going to be better at those things. And you can complain all you like about it not being fair because you work really hard, but it's not going to change the situation. And I think we should really concentrate as parents in explaining to our kids that truly life is often doesn't seem fair, but then to help them to explore those areas in which they do well, or where they do have talent, where they can compete, or where they can succeed, and so that there's less pitying and more feeling. You know, it's a question of building up your kids' confidence and building up their self-worth and helping them to understand that, you know, if you're just going to change your attitude and go and look for something that you really do well, you can really change a negative into a positive.
And I love that you said too, Rosemary, about no matter what, how much you think something is unfair, it really doesn't matter. It's not going to change the situation. That's the crux of all this, right? So at that point, do you continue to focus on the unfairness and go spiral downward, or take positive action as a parent, like you explained, and say, hey, but this is something that you can explore. This is something you
Right.
are great at. But you could focus more on that, or continue focusing and understand that there are others that are going to be better at times with certain things. If it's football, maybe they're the best person to run the ball down the field, but you're really good at defense, or like whatever it might be, right?
Right.
There's always something that
Or
you
you
can
happen to be a
focus
great
on.
cook in the kitchen or something, you know,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
exactly.
Everybody's got their own talents. I do also think that, and I think it's important to mention this too, I think when we start to feel sorry for ourselves, I've already said often it comes from a place of feeling sorry for yourself, but it also often comes, not always, but often comes from a place of jealousy.
Well, that's a big one. Yeah.
You see other people succeeding, you see other people seeming to succeed because we don't know what happens behind closed doors. You see people, you know, somebody's prettier than you. Somebody's, you know, I mean, I was very pretty as a girl, but, you know, and people could be jealous of my prettiness and all the rest of it. But were they jealous when I was in the hospital going through major surgeries? What I'm saying, you don't,
Yeah.
you can't, you know, somebody may have something here, but they may have, you know, something that we perceive as being, you know, well, how come she, you know, how come she was the prettiest in the bunch? How come she was the prettiest kid and what have you?
And
Uh,
money's another example of that too, Rosemary. Someone has a great car. Why do they have a great car? That their house is beautiful, and well, maybe they're in serious debt too. Like maybe
right?
they're on the verge of a
Maybe,
divorce, or their kids, they're having
yeah,
major issues with their kid. Like those are the things. Again, that judgment piece, right?
yeah,
About what's fair and what's not
yeah.
fair.
But it's also about the jealousy of a thing as well, and you know, I mean, you're right. The people who have the big cars and the big houses, I know people who live so on the edge. I don't know how they sleep at night. I would rather have less and sleep better. Um, but I think again, it's we sort of talking about judgment. We're judging, you know, well, she, you know, how come she's the pretty one, or how come she, you know, how come she looks as good as she does, or how come he, you know, how come he's got that fancy car and I have to work down the coal mines and I don't get the money to earn the, you know, the fancy car and so on. But maybe the guy who's got the fancy car has not got a decent wife or a decent relationship or beautiful kids, and maybe the guy down the coal mine has got all of those things. So be careful what you start to get jealous over, or what you start to covet, and what you start to wish was yours, or it's all right for you. I've had people say that to me so many times because they perceive that I'm you know pretty, I've got jewelry, I've got the house, I've got this and that, and it's all right for you. uh, and people actually believe, and I don't know quite why this is. uh, they believe with me, and consequently then I'm sure they believe with other people. So again, it's judgment. Well, it's all right for you, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And I think, excuse me. And we look at people who we think are better off than us, or prettier than us, or got more than we've got. And rarely does anybody say, yes, but he sacrificed his relationship with his wife,
Right.
hardly sees his kids. He's got all of that stuff, but he's worked damned hard for it.
I once had a friend of mine who struggled with weight. Once I was trying to talk to him about his weight and help him out, so that he was healthy, and that's the most important thing about weight. And he said to me, he's like, "Well, you don't have to worry about it." And this is when I was a little younger. I'm still in pretty good shape, but he said, "Al, you have a body like Atlas. You don't have anything to worry about." And I thought about it. I was like, wait, I work out every day. you know, I I bust my hump every day, and like he's saying it is like it's not
Well, it's
fair.
all
You don't
right
even
for
have a
you.
right to talk
Yeah,
about it, right?
it's all right for you. You've got it all, and
Yeah,
not
but
and
I'm
not
thinking,
not perceiving that you
yeah, I'm
could.
thinking like, wait, I work really hard at staying in shape.
Right, right,
For health reasons, for yeah, feeling good, all those reasons, I do that. But that's another case of people just don't understand what others are going through, right? And the fact that, hey, don't just quickly judge what's fair and not fair. There's stuff behind the scenes that's going on that makes a difference in what your judgment is, or how you're seeing things.
right. Exactly. And I mean, again, let's look at the reasons that caused the person to say it's not fair. We're sort of moving away from kids now. We're talking about adults. But I feel often that an adult who says it's not fair in that way is, I want to say, what are you, 8?
It's
Are,
immature.
are
It's
you eight
immature,
years
right?
old?
Yeah,
It's a very, it's an extremely immature feeling. We're all capable of it.
right.
Um, I'm not saying, I'm not saying. I remember once thinking that I'd lost a whole bunch of jewelry, and uh, due to a couple who'd said they'd take care of it, and they were mortified. And I remember getting up in the morning after being told that all this stuff had gone, and I went to make the fire. It was a coal fire, and I can remember I was I was on my knees, and I was poking the fire really hard, and I was saying to anybody who would listen that it's not fair, it's not fair. It's like, it really isn't fair. But then I pulled myself together, and when the friends came back, they couldn't believe that I did eventually. It took me a little while, but I took the attitude of, that we can't change it. And so, and I remember the guy saying to me, "Why aren't you shouting at me? Why aren't you yelling at me?" Because that's exactly what he would have done to me. And I said, "Well, first of all, I handed that responsibility to you. Therefore, I should have done it myself. Um, but second of all, what does shouting and screaming and raging and having a pity party or getting upset, really and truly, what does it get you? And all it gets you is a lot of negative energy, a lot of a high blood pressure, and,
Stress, headaches, all that. Yep.
but the bottom line is, it doesn't change a thing.
Doesn't change the situation, like you
Doesn't
said.
change
Right.
anything. And the only way that you can change it, I feel, is to try, if you can, to be positive, and to accept, well, if I feel that something is unfair, maybe I can work towards making it better. Maybe I can, talk to somebody about it, as my 6-year-old wanted to talk to me. Or you can say, you can say, all right, I'm just, it happened. Let's move on. It's what happened is not as important because that was history. I did a quiz with Reese yesterday, and I said, okay, the category, yes, he's 6. The category is history, and he said yes, and I said, do you know what that means? He said, well, history can mean a long time ago, it can mean yesterday. So this is learning. He's learned from me because we do quizzes all the time. So history can be 5 minutes ago. You cannot change what happened 5 minutes ago, but what you can change is the now, and what you can change is the future. And you can only change that for the better if you have a great and a positive attitude. As we talk, everything is attitude, which is what this show is all about. So if something that seems unfair has happened to somebody, I think it's important to know the reasons why we tend to spiral down about it. So jealousy comes into it, certainly judging people without even knowing the facts comes into it. Self-pitying, I can speak to that, can come into it. So knowing those things exist
It's,
and that we can buy into them, what can we do about it?
it also it also becomes, I think, an excuse for people too, right? Like, hey, well, it's not fair. I can't do anything about it, and
Yeah.
that and all of that. We talk about this spiral, but what does that really mean to people? That means someone who's got a really toxic outlook on life. They
Yeah.
become bitter. They
Yeah.
become angry. They become frustrated. Their stress levels go up. Like those are the kind of things that happen when you do this kind of stuff and all the other stuff we talk about with everything is attitude. But in particular, fairness can really degrade your everyday attitude and perspective and energy and all that, right?
And it does. I mean, I grew up with probably certainly certainly the most bitter, the most angry, and the most self-pitying person that I've ever met in my life, and that was my mother. And her whole life was all about it's not fair. So I
Her whole life,
our
Rosemary.
whole
Right.
and she lived to be 86 years old. So for at least uh, at least 65 or 70 of those years, she, sort of a girl growing up. But even as a kid, I know that she felt this. So I'm going to say for 80 years, this woman got stuck. My mother, she got totally stuck with the it's not fair, self-pitying, poor me, resentment, anger, and bitterness. And did it change anything? It actually changed her life and made it more and more and more miserable. I can remember when she was somewhere around 70 something or another, and she was in hospital, and everybody said she was dying. The funny thing was, I knew she wasn't dying, but still, everybody was playing the game and sort of arrived at the hospital. My mother's croaking on the bed, saying, yeah, "This is it. This is it. I'm going. I'm going." So, being a positive person and trying to have a good attitude, I say to her, "Yes, but Mum, just think of all the wonderful people that you're going to meet when you die." And my mother dying on a deathbed, I could hardly talk like this. She was so frail and so on. She actually was driven by anger, bitterness, and this awful, overwhelming feeling of unfairness. Uh, she actually sat up in bed, which she couldn't do 2 seconds before. She actually sat up in bed and she snarled at me. I mean, it's the only way that I can say it. She snarled at me. There is no one there that I want to see. Right? Do you understand why I'm saying this is the most bitter woman I've ever known? And all of that stemming from this continual feeling of it's not fair. My mother married that guy, and I don't like him. They go out at night and leave me by myself. The fact that she used to climb out of the window when she was 14 and 15 years old and escape, she used to climb out the kitchen window and go off. But that she was angry and bitter from the moment her mother met her stepfather, and she was resentful, and it stemmed from jealousy.
And that's a big one too, Rosemary. Like we talk about, we've been talking about fairness, and I just mentioned it could be an excuse. You're talking about some of the if you think something's unfair, I think the reflection piece and kind of seeing maybe you're at fault for the unfairness, right? Maybe your actions, maybe with the job you called in sick 10 times because you wanted to go away for the weekend. So it's easy to dismiss and say, oh, it's unfair I didn't get the promotion. But wait, you took 10 days off just to make your weekends longer on Fridays and Mondays. Maybe that's the reason. So the culpability piece of it too, right?
Absolutely, but let's not forget those people who do put in, their heart and soul and do a great job, and they have a lousy boss. I know you've had a couple at least. They have a lousy boss who it doesn't matter what you do, or how you do it, or how much you work, or how reliable you are. They simply don't like you, and because they
And
simply don't
that's
like
where the
you,
that's where the injustice or unjust comes in because it
well,
may truly be unfair, right?
yes, yes, and that's it. That sort of we're stepping into the unjust part of it, but they don't like you because it stems from jealousy,
Right.
because maybe she was jealous because you did a really great job and a maybe better job than you, or maybe she has serious self-worth issues, and you don't seem to. And again, be careful to judge, because just because somebody seems like a confident person doesn't mean that they necessarily are.
Right.
So, all right, for whatever reason we might feel unfair, and uh, sometimes we have reasons to feel that life isn't fair. Sometimes we have really good reasons to feel that life isn't fair. Um, what are the ingredients we're going to put in this pot? Before we do this, do we have any comments at all?
We do. We have Ari says, happy to hear you. Sharon says, jealousy of others stems from our own insecurities about ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a projection of our own feelings of self worth.
Yeah.
She also says communication is key. Like we were talking about before, actually, instead of harping on it, go and talk to whoever is
Right.
saying it, right?
Right.
Um, Sarah says, got you live twice this week, so I guess I saw one of your other shows. Nettie is listening while driving, so
Oh,
she's listening like
careful.
that. But I think she's being safe. She said she
Good.
can't watch, so she's not watching and driving. She's
Oh
just
well,
listening.
that's good. That's good then. Okay.
So yeah, so that's all the comments so far, but we have a bunch of reactions, likes, and loves as well.
I love that. Don't you love that when people do the likes and loves and things?
Yes. I love that Facebook added that the heart feature,
I
not
know.
just the like
Isn't
feature.
that nice? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to what are the ingredients that we could put in the bowl to combat right or wrong feelings of something simply isn't fair, or life isn't fair. And I know that some people it seems as if they get hit over and over again when it seems that other people escape. But be careful, again, you do not know what goes on behind closed doors. So even though you think somebody is having the best life ever, take a step back, because they may well be having to deal with all sorts of issues that you don't know about. So what are the ingredients to combat it? What can we tell people that that might be a good way for them to move forward to get away from this? It's not fair. I almost said this childish thing of it's not fair. It's not. It's understandable, but from going to feeling really that life isn't fair and having a really good reason for it, or the silliness of people who are 8 years old, even though they've reached the age of 50 or something. So the immaturity of it, so running the gamut, whether or not people have a good reason for feeling life isn't fair or not. What are the ingredients in the pot?
So I just want to let you know, Jay, Jessica, Anna, and Kay are all watching too. So they're no longer in the U.S., but they are watching.
That's nice. That's lovely.
I think one of the first things we talked about is an understanding and ability to go with the flow, like you said, and not understand that you can't change the situation, whether it's fair, not fair, whatever it is. The situation cannot be changed. The past, the history, like you talked about, it cannot be changed. So understanding that the focus can't be on what happened or what you think is unfair, and that can't be changed is probably the biggest key, right? For any of these other things to take effect in the recipe.
Yeah, I feel that it's important that everybody should be allowed a little stamping of the feet,
Right.
or to express their disappointment or whatever it is that they're feeling. Get that out of your system. Get have your little mood, or your little shout at God, or whatever it is you want to do. But have your little piece of pity, because why not? uh, you can feel sorry for yourself, but realize that at some point enough. So,
Right.
you can sit on the floor and complain and moan and go down the spiral and feel sorry for yourself, or you can sit on the floor for a few minutes or a day or something, whatever. But for goodness sake, at some point, get your butt off the floor, get up and start moving forward and focus on what is in your future, rather than harping on what has happened in the past.
And with that, Rosemary, the other piece of the recipe that we spoke about is do something positive that you can control or that may help you learn from what happened and influence something in a positive way in the future. Whether
Yeah.
that's talking to your boss or reflecting on what you've done and honing your skills or being better about handling situations or
Or,
whatever it might be, right?
or talk to a friend.
Yeah.
uh, you know, Air it out with a friend. Now, you have to be careful with this, because if this is a friend who is also
You don't
loving,
want misery loves company.
misery loves company, exactly. So if you're not careful, you talk to the wrong friend, you're going to go way down the spiral. But
Well,
if
that happened to me too, and it isn't fair. Let's go, right?
yeah, exactly. So, sort of talk to a friend. And if you do have someone who says, yeah, life isn't fair, and look what happened to me, this isn't fair, pay attention, because that's how you sound like. Do you really want to sound like that? So again, sort of assessing yourself, assessing what you want from life, and having an attitude which is positive. And I don't like it, it made me feel miserable. However, somewhere or another, there's a lesson in this. I'm going to just focus on the lesson. Maybe there's a really good reason for what happened, and maybe if I stop the pity part, if I stop feeling sorry for myself, I'll find what the good reason is, and I can move forward with that.
Right, and don't use it like we said before. Don't use it as an excuse. Oh, it's not fair, and that's that. And I'm not going to change anything just because that situation's not fair. Well, it may not be fair, or you may not think it's fair, but there may be a reason, something you're doing that has influenced whatever decision was made.
I know, I've had people, I've come across people who, they didn't get the promotion, or they, didn't go to Spain with somebody else or what have you, as they were hoping to. But if you have an open mind and if you have a positive attitude, that not fair part of it can mean it's just making room for another opportunity. It's just
Right.
making room for you to be able to see something else much clearer, or, you know, maybe there's a better job offer coming along for you, this sort of thing. You know, if you have a positive attitude and you just put yourself out there and you say, well, I'm going to work as hard as I can, I'm going to do what I can, and I'm not going to focus on what what is negative. I'm going to focus on what is positive. How do we get people to do that? What can they actively do to to be more positive and more aware that, you know, the responsibility is ours and ours alone, isn't it? We've got choices. Everyone has choices. Do you make the choice to carry on with the pity party? My mother destroyed her entire life, and I have to tell you that she took people down with her.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, my father for one, my sisters, she took people down with her. People who bought into that, she took them down with her, and that's sad.
Yeah, and I think it's situational too. Like we spoke before, like if you get passed up for a promotion, look at what you're doing, and maybe you're not doing the right thing, but also maybe the other person is truly more qualified. Maybe the boss has a reason for doing something, and you know, stepping outside of yourself, I think, is another key ingredient, and
I do.
empathizing and understanding
Yeah.
and trusting that whoever is making a decision that you deem unfair may be doing it because their hands are tied, because it truly is the best decision
So
to be made.
giving the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah,
or another way to look at it, because often we do have bosses who either don't see us or don't want to see us, or maybe have that jealousy factor against us. I mean, maybe that feeling of, you know, this happened and it's simply not fair might be the impetus that you need to go out and find a better job in a better company where you are appreciated.
right.
So again, having the positive attitude rather than the negative attitude.
My aunt, my great aunt, she passed away a number of years ago now. She lived till she was 94 years old,
Wow.
and she had over $1 million in the bank. I think $1.5 million in the bank when she died, and she left almost all of it. We have a very small family on my mother's side, so there are only five kids and two living heirs directly related to her nieces, and then five grand nieces and nephews. And she ended up leaving all of the money, except for a little bit to my mom and dad, and a little less to my aunt. Um, she left over $1 million to the church and nothing to the kids. And we all had that feeling, stomping the feet. That's not fair. It would have
That's
changed. It would have changed our lives in a very real way. That kind of money, but it was. I remember saying to myself, very close to when it happened. I remember saying, "Listen, I am never going to be in a situation where I'm depending on or hopeful of someone passing money on to me to determine my financial success." And I actually started a business a year later. I'd never started my own business, and I started a business a year later because that happened to me. So I took what happened to me and said, never again am I going to be in that spot or feel that much expectation and that much disappointment, because it was unfair that she and that situation too. The money went to the church. How many people that probably helped? I'm hoping that it helped, but
That's
how many,
such a nice positive way to think
right?
about.
But I'm saying, like, it could have, even if it helped just a couple families, and the church, whatever, took more than they should or could, whatever. That's not much for me to judge. The point is, that's how it was meant to be, and I have to just trust in God and the universe that that's for whatever reason that happened, and then turn it into a positive. And the business is still going, 10, 12 years later. So,
Well, I have to tell you that I have a little story about a guy, an older guy who was dying of cancer, and a really good friend of mine, uh, a healer, decided, you know, he lived right next door, and the old guy said to him, if you you know, if you help me and if you sort of come in every day and bring me food and do this and do that and so on and so forth, I'll leave you my house and my money. And so the friend was actually going overboard. And by the time the old guy was sort of getting to the point of dying, my friend was already spending the money that he was going to get from the old boy. And although he was a very fine healer and a lovely, lovely man, I really felt that he was doing what he was doing for perhaps not necessarily the right reasons, because the
Right.
money, certainly, it played on his mind. And he planned a trip to Australia. He planned that he was going to write a book. He planned all of these things, that you know, based on this man's money. And the guy died, and he didn't get a penny. The guy left it all to his some nephew or another that he never saw. And my friend did stamp his feet, and he did shout at God, and he did all of his plans and all of his hopes and his dreams and his wishes were based on that, you know, that what another man's decisions. And you know, I said to him, but the guy, well, he shouldn't have promised. He shouldn't have kept holding the carrot. But at the same time, maybe he felt that if he held the carrot, then he'd get better caretaker. Maybe he was just afraid to be on his own. And you know, you shouldn't have spent the money before it came to you. He
Right.
didn't spend it literally, but certainly in his head, he was going to do all
Right.
the
Right.
great things with it. And he stamped his feet and said, "It's not fair." However, what about the nephew? Would if the guy had left all of his money to the neighbor, would the nephew have felt it's not fair? Who knows? So
I'm sure they would have, right? A
yeah,
good
but you know,
likelihood.
but what my feeling is, you know, you've got to understand that people, you know, other people make their decisions, rightly or wrongly. If you allow their other people's decisions to color your life or to make you embittered or what have you, then more for you, because you're allowing other people to control your emotions, and you're allowing other people to determine, you know, who you're going to be for the rest of your life. You're going to spiral down and say it's not fair and you should have left this to me and so on, and talk about it for the next 5 years and make yourself miserable over it. Or are you going to smile and say, well, I guess, you know, I should never have relied on it in the first place, and that would have still helped him no matter what. So
Right.
you
Right.
know, everything is about the attitude.
It is, and we're coming close to time, Rosemary. And as you know, I have to run to teach. Jess, Kay's Jess, even though she's her own person, says great discussion. Fully agree. Pick yourself up and make a positive plan. Just making the plan will help. Sharon mentioned that she had good results from her mammogram, and she said,
Yay!
"Thank you for the healing yesterday. It took away her anxiety." So thank you for
Brilliant,
that. She said. And we
brilliant.
have Jackie says greetings from Ontario, Canada. Welcome, Jackie. Um, Annette says, agree with all being said. Great chemistry between you both. I think we do have good chemistry, Rosemary, but thank you for
Oh,
saying
I
that.
don't know. I don't think it's fair. You got more airtime than I did today.
I don't, we'll have to go back to see what's really fair or not. I'm not sure about that.
Forget that. Life isn't fair. I never told you it was fair, I'll tell you. Never told anybody it was fair. So let's just live with it and make the most of it. We have to make the most of our lives. All right. Well, we've enjoyed this topic. Thank you all for watching. We hope you got something out of it. Kay, I want to call and talk to you because I have something to say to you, just if she's listening now. I'm going to call you after the show. And if you out there listening have a topic that you'd love us to discuss, if you'd like to come on the show with us, if you'd like to sort of do the, because we do these 3 ways, we do have guests from time to time. So if you'd like to do any of all of those things, you can email me, Rosemary at rosemaryltaylor.com, and in the subject line put Everything is Attitude. Or you can email us info at everythingisattitude.com. Or if you want to know more about Al Pisano, my lovely co-host, who has a fabulous life, and of course, everything is fair in our world, isn't it, Al? You can email him al@alposado.com. We shall see you again next week, probably at the same time. I have to rely on Al to let me know. You can see me on Thursdays for our YouTube show, The Spirit World Sees All, and you can also connect with us where on the healing, which is probably going to be, we're going to do another healing session, which is probably going to be on Wednesday. Watch Facebook, you'll find out what time and all the rest of it. If you want to be on my email list, please email me and request that you want to be on the email list, because you will not be put onto it just by sending me an email. If you want to join the competition, email me again. If you want to know more about the conferences that we're going to be doing, we're hopefully very soon we're going to be doing, keep talking about them, right, Al, but we're going to be doing conferences. We're going to be having all sorts of online conferences. If you want to know more about those, again, email me, Rosemary@RosemaryAltea. And until I meet you again, thank you, Al, for being a fabulous co-host once again. And please, all of you out there, you know what I'm going to say, because I always say this. Please, please, please have a very, very, very blessed day. Thank you for joining us, and have a fabulous and a blessed weekend. Bye, everyone.